This season marks Polaris's 70th year of making snowmobiles, and they have come a long way from where they started with the rear end mounted engine and you're sitting right on the skis, you know, with Edgar Hateen and the stuff he came up with to...
Don't look at me when you're talking about that stuff, because that's way before me too.
Where we are today. So I wanted to take a second in sort of honor of 70 years of making snowmobiles to talk about maybe the 5 of the most influential snowmobiles Polaris has built up until now. And let's start at a sled that you have a lot of experience with.
Well, you can't talk about Polaris in a historical way or in an innovative way without talking about the TXL Indy. The TXL Indy changed snowmobiling like the Rev changed snowmobiling. And the TXL was, first of all, it was light. It was all aluminum bulkhead, aluminum chassis. It had IFS, and nobody had seen anything like that. I mean, people were like, what the heck is that? And then they rode it. And Polaris's incredible reputation for best handling in the business, it started right there. That's where it started, with the TXL.
The next sled we want to talk about is the Fuji 500 Indy 500. And that sled, I believe, probably today could still be classified as the largest selling single model of snowmobile that was unchanged in snowmobiling.
Well, it was in that era, but there's no doubt nobody could get close to them. I was on a Polaris factory tour at that time, and the Indies were selling so well that they were selling more than 50,000 Indies, including the Indy 500, a year.
Just the fact that the Indy 500 was sold for so long, that engine carried on right into the 2000s too. That Fuji 500 stayed with us forever.
Yeah.
But that was a great sled, and I think that was a sled that really brought Polaris to the front of the pack. Yeah. So moving on to the next one.
I think that Polaris shifted the market again when everybody was freaked out and loving triples in the early 90s and to the mid 90s. All of a sudden Polaris comes out in 96 with a twin, a 600cc twin. When they were selling XLT triples and Indy 600, 650 triples, they came out with a twin.
It was domestically built twin too, their own motor.
It was so, and it was in an Indy chassis that they had done some modifications to. They had what they called tipped-in trailing arms, and it made it work more like a stabilized geometry that you get from an A-frame.
And that was really the beginning of twin-cylinder performance snowmobiles.
Polaris was on a mission to rewrite the way snowmobiles were thought of and built, and they did a great job.
Moving on to the next era, we're going to call this the 2000s really, but the sled that stands out after the 600 XC twin, I think, is the IQ chassis. And the IQ chassis has always been, still today, is one of my very favorite snowmobiles. Yeah. They had an absolute huge lineup of models of IQs. My favorite was the Dragon Switchback 136-800. I put more miles on that sled than on any other snowmobile I've ever ridden. And I think that was when Polaris finally started to come up behind Skidoo with the Rev and make a snowmobile that could compete with not just the performance and handling of the Rev, but with the sort of panache of the Rev, if you will.
The IQ cemented the whole idea of Polaris's handling, that Polaris had the best handling front end, and they still do today. And I think that the IQ, it's the sled that really defined that for Polaris. And they haven't looked back.
Well, speaking of handling, of course, the last sled that we're going to talk about is the ones that we're sitting on right now, and that is the Matrix. Again, Polaris has a whole lineup of Matrix sleds, not just one, but there's 25 of them or whatever. But the one that you're sitting on in particular is the one I want to talk about. The Matrix with the industry's very first 2-stroke turbo factory engine in a trail sled, the Patriot Boost. And when you look back at that TXL Indy that you were talking about to how far we've come with this sled in really not that long, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, the turbo exemplifies some pretty trick engineering and the ability for Polaris to do sophisticated stuff. This was a kind of a brave move, because people run sleds on lakes, at least where we do most of our riding. They ride them at WOT like all day long, and that motor, that 850 motor, has got to be stout to take that hairdryer from blowing down its throat pressurized air all day. And we have had just a blast with the turbo. It's a whole nother level of snowmobile fun.
To me, that covers off the most iconic sleds Polaris has made in the past 50 years, really, when we go back as far as we've gone back. And you can see a progression of the industry along with Polaris as you go, how the industry changed here and here and here, oftentimes because of Polaris, not always.
Yeah, it's true, and Polaris has done a great job of completely reinventing the snowmobile again with the Matrix and a lot of the features that are part of that whole package. So hats off to them, and happy birthday, 70 years.